In last video, we discussed about multi-tenant architecture. In this video, we will make use of Spring Boot and we will implement this multi-tenant architecture using discriminator-based approach. So I'll create a Spring Boot application using a Spring initializer. I have added three dependencies: web, Spring Data JPA, and for database I'm making use of PostgreSQL. So I'll make use of Postgres driver. I have opened this project into my IntelliJ IDEA and tried running it. It is running on 8080. To run this application, basically I have commented out these two dependencies, PostgreSQL and Spring Data JPA. So we have simply web dependency for now. Okay, I'll stop this and try to get tenant ID. So in the last video, as we discussed, first we have to get the tenant ID from the request. So here basically user will make a request. User will make a request. Let's say this is our server, not direct database. This is our server. So user will make a request and this application will first try to fetch tenant ID. So tenant ID we can get from the request itself. So what I'll do, I'll try to get tenant ID from request and then I'll try to map that value to the database. So to start with getting value, I'll first create one thread local class that will hold that tenant ID. So I'll create one class tenant filter inside any package. So I got this. Normally in any servlet application we can make use of filter. So I'll show the filter way plus I'll show a Spring way. So here I'll make use of filter first. That is coming from Jakarta servlet, and I'll implement the methods do filter, and this will basically give us whatever value we want from the request. So we have this servlet request. I'll simply cast this to HTTP servlet. This is our servlet request. So I have to explicitly make use of HTTP servlet, and from this I can simply get the whatever value we want to get. So let's say we are sending value as header, and inside header we are passing whatever value we want to pass, like tenant ID. So this is my request. Here inside header I am passing X tenant ID. So I'll try to fetch this X tenant ID from the request itself. So I'll get a string tenant ID equals to request of get header, and here I'll simply pass that string. So this variable will be having the particular given tenant ID for that particular session. After that we have to store this inside thread local. So for that I'll create one utility class tenant context. So this class will basically hold value for that particular request. So here I'll simply make use of thread local, so that will hold our tenant ID. So I'll simply pass tenant ID and I'll create set, get and clear methods. So setter will set value inside this tenant ID variable, and this getter will get value from tenant context itself. So I can directly make use of tenant context or variable. And for clear also I'll make use of tenant context dot tenant id dot remove. Next I'll go back to this filter class, and inside this filter class I'll try to store this tenant id. So tenant context dot set tenant id equal to tenant id. So this will store tenant id for that particular request, and then I'll call the filter chain, and at last I'll clear the context. So this can go inside try catch block. So I'll remove this. Create one finally, and I don't need this. Here basically I'll do the clear part. Now let's create our controller to check whether it is working or not. Tenant controller, and I'll make use of REST controller annotation. Here I'll create one normal get mapping that will return a string. So this tenants will return value from tenant context dot get tenant id. Okay, let's try running this. It is running on port 8080. I'll send a request tenant, and here I'll pass tenant id. Let's say ABC is my tenant 1. Here I got response, but that is empty. So this class needs to be few component, then only it will be like auto add. Let's rerun this. Now it is returning proper value. Let's say I have another tenant ABC1, so it is returning ABC1 XYZ, it is returning XYZ. So this part is working fine, but we are making use of servlet way of getting tenant. So what I'll do, I'll comment this. You can make use of this particular interface, or you can make use of a Spring implementation itself. So using a Spring implementation, we can take help during our authentication authorization during a Spring Security implementation. So we will make use of a Spring class itself. So I'll create one more class, tenant, context filter, and that will basically extends once per request filter. I'll implement method, and here I'll get all the values from request itself, like we did in the filter class itself. So I'll create one variable tenant ID that will get value from request itself, and then I'll set the value for this tenant, and then again I'll do the next filter chain, and at last I'll clear the context. Using this class, basically we can tell a Spring that few methods should not be filtered. So I'll override that should not filter method, and here I'll pass request.get URI starts with, let's say we don't want to filter actuator 1, so I'll pass simply whatever URL starts with actuator should not be filtered. So it will not go for that actuator, and it will not look for tenant ID. Or let's say I'm kind of building application where login is centralized, so for that I will not be making use of this header, so there I have to make use of this should not filter method. Let's retry running. Again we have to make this class component. I'll try xyz1, it is returning same value. Now let's try implementing database approach. So we are getting proper tenant ID from the request. Now what I'll do, I'll create one entity class. I have created a student entity, and I'll mark this table as entity. We have commented this JPA, that's why entity is not coming. Now it should come. Entity is coming, and we will make use of table to name this as a student. I'll create one, of course ID is needed, so one ID, and it should be generated value, and a strategy. I'll pass as identity. Okay, for the sake of this example I'll just take a few value only, like a string name, a string email, and as we discussed earlier, like every table should have tenant ID. So I'll create one field private a string tenant ID. To make this proper tenant ID, we have to annotate this column as tenant ID. So Spring will be aware that this particular column is using as a discriminator. So further when we will implement other auditing and other thing, then we will try to create one base class where we will keep this tenant id created at updated at this type of auditable data, and every entity will extend that particular class. So we will make use of audit listener in the next video, and there we will try to implement auditing for this particular application. Okay, so I need to create getter and setter. I have created getter and setter for this particular class, and now to start application I need certain properties like data source, database URL name. So I'll copy the code and I'll explain one by one. First one is URL to connect with Postgres, and here I am passing database name, my database username, password, and here specific properties are for multi-tenant application, like default schema should be public. So in case of there is no schema found, in that case it will go for public, and PostgreSQL provide this public schema, so we don't have to worry about this part. And for multi-tenancy we are making use of discriminator-based approach. If you want a schema-based approach, comment in this video schema, and I'll make a video for a schema-based approach. If you want per DB based approach, comment DB, and I'll make a video for DB based implementation. And this resolver is nothing but we will create resolver that will tell Hibernate that we are making use of that particular resolver to resolve tenant ID. So we are making use of this particular package, so I'll change the package structure and class name. So I'll create one more class, tenant identifier resolver, and I'll copy the reference, copy reference. So it will copy the fully classified name, and I can change this to that. So that is coming from our this package schoolapp.config and the class name. You can pass simply that value, or you can copy by going here, click on this particular class name, then copy reference. Okay, so here we have to extend or implement this current tenant resolver, identifier resolver, so first one basically get data from the our same old tenant context dot get tenant id, and this should be also notated as component, and this will get data from session, so I'll make it as true. It will get data from session. Now we have this entity class, and we have to get and set data inside database, so we will create one repository. It will be interface I have created a student repository. It will extend JPA repository, and first parameter will be student entity, and ID will be long. So this will provide us all the necessary method like find all, save methods. Now we can make use of this class, and then we can simply get the data and set the data. So I'll go inside this controller, private final student repository, and I'll create constructor so that it will do the dependency injection, and I'll create one post mapping to save data. So here I'll take as a request body, and from here I will return the created student. So return response entity dot OK. Instead of OK, I'll make use of status that will return normal our application status. So status will be created from the HTTP status. It is not coming. Created, and inside body we will pass whatever data we created, student repository dot save, and we will pass this data, and whatever it will return, we can return that, or we can extract this value and from here we can return whatever data we got back from the database. One more method we need to check all the values corresponding to that particular tenant. So I'll create get all method. So this will return all the values from that particular table for that particular tenant. I will again make this response entity, and inside that I'll pass iterable, and from here I'll return responsive, and it will pass OK status, and it will get data from the table itself. Okay, I'll restart this application. I'll open database, and we will validate whether data is being saved or not. So our database name is ERP test, and inside that we should have one table. As we did not pass here like create or update a structure, so we have to manually create tables, and after that we can simply save data. I have this ERP test open, and inside that I have this student table. I'll try to fetch data. I have this schema. Now I'll try to save data first. So I'll send a post request to this particular controller, and inside header I'll pass tenant ID. Let's say I'm passing ABC as tenant ID, and inside body I'm passing a student1 and this particular email ID. I got response as 201 and value created. Here I'll refresh. Yeah, data got saved. So I'll create few more record. So I have created 3 records. Let's validate 4 records. One is from ABC tenant, one is from XYZ tenant, and 2 is inside XYZ1 tenant. So I'll try to fetch data for that particular tenants. So XYZ1 will be having 2 data. If I try to fetch all data, it will append where query and it will add this discriminator internally. So I'll get only value for this XYZ, only 2 value. If I'll pass XYZ only, so I'll get only 1 data. If I will pass ABC, I'll get only 1 data. So internally Hibernate is taking care of where queries and it is doing all the operations like find all. When I'm trying to save data, it is appending where query and creating insert query. Yeah, so that's all for this video. In next video, I'll try to create proper structure of this application, and there I'll discuss how we can make use of auditing and how we can save data for the created by user, created at time. Those things will be automatically saved into this particular database. Yeah, that's all for this video. Please like and subscribe to keep yourself updated for the further video. Thank you.